This is the story of the Amityville Horror, the true life haunting of the infamous residence. Yes, 112 Ocean Avenue, a large Dutch colonial house situated in a suburban neighbourhood in Amityville on the south shore of Long Island, New York. This house, sitting some 30 miles outside of New York City, nestled in the Long Island town of Amityville, stands as the house forever linked to the Amityville horror incident that shocked everyone to the core. On the 13th of November 1974, Ronald DeFeo Jr. shot and killed 6 members of his family at the Long Island residence in 1974, and frightening tales about the home continue to spook and strike fear into people since those shocking murders. What had caused those paranormal symptoms that compelled Ronald Joseph DeFeo Jr. to commit mass murders on his family inside the house on the fateful night in question? At the time, DeFeo Jr. was just 23 years old, and in the middle of the night, he just got up and then decided to shoot his parents and 4 siblings, Dawn 18 years old, Alison 13, Mark 12 and John 9 years old, as they lay asleep whilst he used a .35 Marlin rifle. He then ran into a local bar and, according to court information, he shouted, "You got to help me, I think my mother and father are shot." Ronald DeFeo Jr. initially blamed a mob hitman for committing the acts, but after intense questioning, he then admitted to committing the murders and cleaning up the evidence that would have implicated him. He was tried and then pleaded insanity, and he was convicted of second-degree murder, and he was later sentenced to 6 terms of 25 years to life in prison. And later, Ronald DeFeo Jr. died in prison in March 2021. 112 Ocean Avenue then remained empty for some time after the murders, but then in 1974, and about 1 year later, and despite the gruesome murders that had taken place there, and in December 1975, George and Kathleen Lutz bought the 5-bedroom house for a bargain price of $80,000 due to the murders, and their 3 children along with their dog Harry moved into the house. But this proved to be a very bad decision. George and Kathy had married in July 1975 and each had their own homes, but they wanted to start fresh with this new property. They moved in on the 18th of December 1975. Now, Kathy already had the 3 children from her previous marriage, Daniel, Christopher and Melissa, and so they moved in full of hope and to start afresh, a new beginning. As they first inspected the house, the estate agent told them about the Ronald DeFeo murders and asked if this would affect their decision, but after they discussed the matter, they decided that it was not a problem. At the time, a friend of George Lutz had learned about the history of the house and insisted to the couple to have it blessed, and George had no idea of what this would entail, and so his wife explained the process to him. So they called in a Catholic priest, Father Mancuso, Father Ray, who agreed to carry out the house blessing, and so he arrived to perform the blessing while George and Kathy were unpacking their belongings on the afternoon of December the 18th, 1975, and he went into the building to carry out the rites. It was then, when he flicked the first holy water and he began to pray, that he reeled back as he heard a masculine voice demand that he get out. Father Mancuso never mentioned this incident to either George or Kathy as he left the house, and a few days later, on December the 24th, 1975, Father Mancuso then called George Lutz and advised him. He said, "Stay out of the 2nd floor room," which had been the former bedroom of Mark and John Matthew, the 2 that were murdered, the parents of Ronald, and it was a room that Kathy Lutz had planned to use as a sewing room, and it was where he had heard the mysterious and threatening voice. But disturbingly, the call was cut short by static and the line just went dead. Even more shockingly, Father Mancuso had also allegedly developed a high fever and blisters on his hands, and he knew that something was very wrong within the confines of the Amityville house. For the first few days, George and Kathy experienced nothing unusual in the house. However, it was just after 28 days of living there that the Lutzes fled the house and claimed to have been terrorized by paranormal phenomena, strange occurrences, and an evil so personified that they had no option but to flee. George was even said to have woken up at 3:15 a.m. every morning, just like that, and which was around the same time that Ronald DeFeo had carried out his murders, often referred to as the witching hour by many. Now in folklore, the witching hour or devil's hour is a time of night that is associated with supernatural events whereby witches, demons and ghosts are thought to appear and to be at their most powerful. The devil's hour being 3 a.m. is considered significant as it is the opposite hour to the death of Christ. Now the Bible reads that Jesus Christ was placed on the cross at 9 a.m. and then darkness covered the land from noon until Jesus' death at 3 p.m. Therefore 3 a.m. is spiritually called the devil's hour or witching hour. Some people also believe that this is when the barriers between the natural and the spiritual world get thin to a point where occupants of both worlds can meet and bond, and it is thought that this is a time of inactivity on earth that allows the spiritual world to get active. So George Lutz getting up this time was disconcerting, and coupled with Ronald committing the murders at this time as well was equally disturbing. Now as the world began to look in as to what was happening with the Lutzes, they declined to give a full account of the events that took place, describing them as too evil and too frightening. The Amityville Horror was later made into a book by American author Jay Anson and was published years since the Lutzes fled the house in September 1977. It was also then the basis of a series of films released from 1979 onwards. Just for the record, Stuart Rosenberg's 1979 version of the Amityville Horror, starring James Brolin and Margot Kidder, is a way better version of the film and story, as opposed to Andrew Douglas's 2009 remake starring Ryan Reynolds and Melissa George. Now the book was heavily based on the claims of paranormal experience by the Lutz family, but as time went on and as the story became famous, many skeptics began to question the truth of the Lutz's family's claims, and this led to controversy and lawsuits over the veracity of its claims. Anyway, moving back to the Lutz's story, they then got in touch with Father Mancuso, and on January the 14th, 1976, George and Kathy Lutz, with their 3 kids and their dog Harry, left 112 Ocean Avenue. Now, whilst they took some of their belongings, they left the majority behind, and they went to stay at Kathy's mother's house in nearby Deer Park, New York, until such time as they had sorted out the problems with the house. But in a shocking twist of events, they claimed that the phenomena, the demonic spirits, had followed them to Kathy's mother's house and described a green-black slime that was coming up the staircase towards them. Ultimately, the Amityville house remains as it was and has changed hands for decades, with nothing but price fluctuations and a change in address serving as notable instance. It is now 108 Ocean Avenue and not 112. However, despite the Amityville Horror House address change, the public fascination never let up, and still, to this day, many people still seek to get inside the Amityville Horror House just to get a taste of its history, its supposed evil, demonic spirits, and the terrors that occurred. Now, the Lutz's spine-tingling tales of paranormal activity, demonic voices, strange noises, and all manner of evil goings on there have been the talking point for years and years. But what do you think of what has happened? Was there any truth to what the Lutzes were saying? What do you think has happened? Now, I'm off to get a nice cup of tea, steeped to my liking, and I'll catch you for the next instalment. Cheers.